Some people just can't keep their mouths shut. Even if there's a lot riding on it, they can't keep quiet. They believe they're so fundamentally correct about everything that they can't help but sound off on every conversation that takes place around them. Do you know somebody like that? It reminds me of a bad case of diarrhea. No matter what you do, you just can't hold it in. This brings us to our focus of today, Pablo Hidalgo, the Lucasfilm creative executive whose job was to basically watch over Star Wars canon and protect it so that it made sense. Well, unfortunately for poor Pablo, it seems he's gone the way of Chuck Wendig, meaning he got his ass fired for talking too damn much.
Can't you stop your lips from flapping for 2 little minutes?
In this video, we're first going to look at the evidence that Pablo Hidalgo got fired. There's been no official announcement as of this recording, but it seems the likeliest explanation for what we've seen the past few days. And then, we're going to look at some of the reasons that Pablo may have lost his job. And finally, we're going to talk about what this may mean for Lucasfilm and Star Wars, because it's possible the parent company, Disney, is no longer playing around with these guys who keep pissing off fans and calling us names. As a Star Wars fan, what would it take for you to embrace Disney Star Wars again? I'm genuinely curious, so drop your thoughts in the comment section and we'll talk about it. In the meantime, it's amusing to see someone like Pablo Hidalgo, someone holier than thou and snarky as hell, get knocked down several pegs.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Puny god.
Alright, so what's going on with Pablo Hidalgo? Before we dig into that, we need to understand who this guy is. For those who don't know, Pablo has worked for Lucasfilm for a while now as a member of their story group, a panel that helps writers with their stories to make sure they aren't messing up continuity. He's kinda like a traffic light for all the different Star Wars stories to make sure they aren't crashing into each other with contradictions. More on that function of his job later. It's also worth noting that this guy is also the sort who talks Star Wars all the time, which is obviously something I can respect. He especially talks lore with fans, which is cool. Unfortunately, that's not all he posts. He has a history of being demeaning towards fans on his Twitter account and a history of being especially partisan in nature. This here is one of the more infamous instances of Pablo messing with the fandom. The YouTuber Star Wars Theory got a bit emotional while watching a Star Wars trailer, and Pablo mocked him by saying, "Emotions are not for sharing." The fandom backlash was pretty swift and brutal, and Pablo deleted the tweet, seemingly acknowledging his wrongdoing.
I'm an inconsiderate prick!
But something happened recently, something bad for poor Pablo. If we look at his Twitter account, we can see that it's been locked. All evidence of his association with Star Wars has been scrubbed. For a guy like Hidalgo, perpetually plugged into Twitter and running his mouth, note the nearly 35,000 tweets. But for a guy like him, this is really strange. It really seems like he's no longer with Disney.
Oh, that's too bad. We're so sorry.
As for why he may have gotten fired, there are a few theories running around. The most prominent one is featured in this article from LRM Online. Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo talks compromises with Bad Robot on The Force Awakens in now deleted tweet. After the article's first line, which is redundant with the headline, the article reads, "As said, the post, which certainly caused a bit of a story when it went live, has now been deleted. Therefore, the link here actually goes nowhere currently." However, what can't be deleted easily is the fact I read it myself. So here is what it actually said in relation to why Coruscant wasn't the center of the Republic in The Force Awakens. Basically, Bad Robot wanted it blown up. Lucasfilms didn't. Hosnian Prime was the unsatisfying middle ground. It happens. Hidalgo then went on more in another comment. I cannot quote this one exactly any longer. However, Hidalgo basically intimated that the Starkiller base idea as a whole was a bad call. He made no mention of whose idea using Starkiller base was. Therefore, we cannot say for certain this was something J.J. Abrams and his Bad Robot company wanted or not. My guess is that this was also a Bad Robot decision. Now, as we can note here, this article is dated January 17th, so the aforementioned tweets took place sometime in early January. I remember when this story first came out, I didn't think much of it and didn't cover it, but when we combine this story with the fact that Pablo deleted the tweets and scrubbed his Twitter account, it becomes much more important. Even more important is this. Do you remember the memo that Bob Chapek publicly released to all Disney employees? In several places, he talks about how the company is going to focus on taking care of the customers moving forward. Many people took this as a cryptic warning to people like Pablo Hidalgo: stop running your mouth and pissing off potential customers. Disney isn't going to tolerate it any longer.
Shut up!
For all his faults, I must concede that Pablo Hidalgo was certainly a knowledgeable steward of Star Wars canon, but it seems like he and his story group panel are no longer functioning. Beware of minor spoilers for the most recent episode of the Book of Boba Fett beyond this point. If you haven't seen episode 6 of the Book of Boba Fett and don't want to hear this, you don't want spoilers, then skip ahead to this point in the video. Okay, if you're still watching this part, then you're not worried about spoilers apparently. So, when Luke Skywalker presents Grogu with Yoda's old lightsaber, this completely violates canon and continuity. How? Well, as it was pointed out to me by a few commenters the other day, Yoda's lightsaber was apparently destroyed in Darth Vader issue number 1 a few years ago. In the comic, the saber was recovered after the Emperor zapped it out of Yoda's hands during their battle, and then it was chucked into an incinerator with a bunch of other lightsabers. This is one more reason why I'm beginning to suspect we're watching a Star Wars multiverse play out where they're a lot less concerned with canon. At this point, I see 3 possibilities for why Pablo Hidalgo was fired. Either A, Pablo was let go because the story group isn't a priority to Lucasfilm any longer. And if that's the case, my multiverse idea that I presented yesterday becomes much likelier. Basically, it's the idea that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have their own corner of the galaxy far, far away to play in, which will operate independently of anything that Kathleen Kennedy and her High Republic cronies put out. They no longer have to worry about canonically meshing with all that High Republic material.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Either that, or B, the story group is still assembled, but they screwed up big time with some of the inconsistencies in the Book of Boba Fett's Episode 6, and maybe Pablo was a casualty of that screw-up.
Oh, dear God, no!
Or it could be option C. Disney really is turning over a new leaf when it comes to social media. Perhaps Pablo was on Chapek's naughty list for some of the crap he's posted in the past, and this Hosnian Prime controversy was just the excuse they were looking for. I have my doubts on this one, however, based on the recent Whoopi Goldberg controversy where Disney has refused to fire her despite the fact that she's doubled and tripled down on her bad takes. But hey, maybe the difference is that in all of Pablo's other offensive tweets, he was making fun of the fans. However, in the Hosnian Prime tweets, he made the mistake of criticizing Disney.
You crossed a line.
What do you think the reason is for Pablo's seeming departure from Lucasfilm? Was he fired because the story group is disassembled? Or was he fired because he screwed up? Or was he fired because Disney is cracking down on social media? Or was it something else entirely? I want to see what you think in the comment section, so let me know and we'll talk about it. In the meantime, here's hoping that the next one to fall under the proverbial axe of Disney is the cantankerous crone of misery herself, Kathleen Kennedy.
Come back here, so that I may praise thee!
Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your captain is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.